Because, she's supposed to have to ask these agonizing questions, and instead she's just like, you wrote that thing, didn't you? It's funny because when you, there's all these things you do. You write a book, and then your publisher and editor ask you to write a whole lot of other things that are like meta book, or how do I say that, like outside the book. So it kind of, and I shouldn't say this on here, but you end up as the author kind of writing or rewriting everything about the book, like the catalog copy, the advertising copy, the stuff. You think you wouldn't, but kind of, I guess you feel like at every stage you want to have input in how the book is presented. So, so at one point she said, write us a letter to tell us, these books go out in the mail. I don't know if you guys know, but in America, there are 3 million books published per year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And how many Americans do we have? Like 300 million? So 1%, every year, 1% of the people publish a book. So it's a little bit shocking, and so it's very hard to get attention for a book, and those of you who are writers know this. So you can write a great book, but getting any attention in this very busy world. I mean, people teach entire courses on how to get attention for self-published books or for books from small presses, and so you think that just writing the book is the main thing, but there's a lot more, and I'm very lucky to be published with W.W. Norton because it's built in that we have an outreach. And so they asked me to write this note. They said, explain to people, because they're going to send a copy of the book in the mail, an ARC, an advanced reading copy, and they want to know that, and yet people get every day a dozen advanced reading copies. So you're supposed to write a letter to convince people to read yours rather than all the other ones. So as a long explanation of this note. But I was trying to be honest, and I can't really do that publicity without sort of being honest, so this is painfully honest. A brief note from the author who does not like to be brief. In Michigan, where I live, there are about 1 million bodies of water large enough to drown in, and many more extraordinary women than that, including my granny, for over half a century made her home on a small island in the St. Joseph River. She famously wore high heels to please her husband. Also, there was my stubborn mama, who created her own kind of island from a swamp of circumstance, and then crowned herself the queen of the men and the children and the livestock around her, and raised a glass to herself. My mother implored me to write simple mysteries in which the perpetrators were caught, the crime was understood, and the characters and situations put to bed. But what is more mysterious than motherhood, I asked her, or daughterhood, or sisterhood? She shook her head and continued drinking and smoking, and then contracted breast cancer for the second time. As a gesture of love, or that is how it felt, I contracted my own breast cancer. While I had surgery and radiation, my mother faded. I wrote The Waters because she died and I did not, because I know what it was to lose an extravagant mother. And I wrote the book because I grew up surrounded by water, seeping from below, trickling off snowmelt, settling in stagnant ponds. Some days in my youth I was covered with leeches, collecting eventually into the Great Lakes. The women around me too were bodies of water, flowing and always changing, seasonally flooding. I grew up milking a cow, canning tomatoes, and making homemade wine. As a Michigander, I take joy in the lakes and streams and swamps and forests around me. As a liberal woman, I feel heartbroken over the political divisions in my community, which are evident in the shooting deaths of my neighbors, in the anger of men resisting change and driving their big trucks, the addictions of women, as well as the destruction and polluting of natural places. This book is an exploration of all that joy and sorrow. The Waters is an earthy story about an isolated community written in the tradition of country noir. And it is also an old-fashioned story, a fable, an American fairy tale that simplifies situations in order to distill truths about who we are in this wilderness nation. This is a novel of place, and that the women of the Waters are who they are because of the nourishing landscape, the artesian springs, the heaving wooded swampland, the trickling rivulets, the healing plants. And those who live in the drained, cultivated land around the waters, with their desire to tame and civilize the wild places, something like a biblical mandate, they are also seeking fulfillment and trying to improve the lives of their families. In the Waters, I have gone out on a limb, suggesting a radical way of seeing what we are to each other, how the political right and left are as integrally connected as men are to women. In this book, I am trying to figure out how we can all live together with real or metaphorical rattlesnakes in our gardens and backyards, and how we can still love each other and find meaning in our lives together. The venom here is elemental, even necessary. Life in the swamp is beautiful and dangerous. I hope you will love the people in this book, the landscape, the animals. I hope you can gaze into this pool and see a world that matters desperately. Maybe you can even see a glimpse of yourself in its turbulent surface.
Thank you, Bonnie.
I don't know if anybody read that, but they got it nailed in the, who knows.
I wonder if we should explain a little bit about the, you talked about the book really stemming from your relationship and examining the relationships between mothers and daughters, which you've explored in multiple works. But in this one, there's a multiple generations. So we've got, and maybe we could just talk really briefly about the major characters in case, I'm guessing because it just came out, we don't have folks that might have read it.
Only you were forced to proofread it.
Oh. I think there might be a few people who probably already sped through it. It was released last Tuesday. There are people that do that kind of thing. Okay, so tell us just a little bit about the generations of women.
Yeah, there are three generations of women in the book, and this was really fun for me to write because I got to focus on the three sorts of women that I'm sort of fascinated with these days. And one is the matriarch of the family named Hermine, and they call her herself. And the reason I did that, to call this woman herself, is because I grew up in a kind of Irish family, and it's a tradition in Irish families that the patriarch is called or referred to as himself. Oh, does himself want a cup of coffee? And so I thought I wanted to create a woman who had that kind of authority in the family. So Hermine is herself. And actually all the people of the community call her that. She's a very important person in the community. But she's old and she's tired. And she's a healer in that she makes some local medicines from the things in the swamp. And she's been providing this healing for the people of the community, and she's kind of feeling unappreciated. And she has 3 daughters, all of whom seem to run off and maybe not appreciate her. And there are 3 daughters, and the youngest daughter is the most beautiful and the laziest. And so from your fairy tales that then she will be the one to save them all. It's always that way. And then, Rose Thorne is her name. I tried to change her name. I didn't need to have such a corny name. But I had readers for the book, and every time I tried to change her name, everybody said, no, that's her name. It was her name. And so people call her Rosie as well. And she is, maybe some of you know this person in your family or your neighborhood. She likes to lie around and read books and socialize sometimes and drink and smoke. She's that kind of gal. She's maybe a party gal a little bit. And I've always been interested in this kind of woman who wouldn't behave. The woman who won't get a job, won't behave, and yet I think often these women play an important role in a community. She, in some ways, Rose Thorne is the one who can bring people together because she can throw a party. And that's a way to get people together. And then the third generation is, there's a girl who's 11 who loves, she's grown up in this kind of crazy family of all women at this point, and she just is hungry for men. She's just hungry for the masculine element, and it sort of terrifies the people around her that she is this way. And she loves mathematics and men. And the problem in the book the urgency and the problem in the book stems from the fact that these women, they live in the swamp, they want to keep their old way of life. They're not Christians, they don't go to church with the other people of the community, and it's sort of in recent times there's become kind of a strident nature in the local church and the local town, and these women are kind of being vilified by some element of the community, and now they're being treated with suspicion, and it's actually become a little bit dangerous for these women. So that's the situation in which you're plopped into as the reader when the book opens.
And you mentioned, Bonnie, that it sort of has a kind of fairy tale kind of quality to it. And unlike some of your other work, this is told in an omniscient point of view. So there's almost this godlike perspective. We move through these different characters and their minds. And why did you kind of choose to approach it in that way? What did that omniscient point of view allow you to do?
Yeah, this book took a long time to write, and if I ever write a panel to talk about fiction writing at the Loft or anything, I'm going to have a group of people get together and we're going to say, every novel is harder to write than the last one. So that's the premise. So this took a long time to write, and maybe because I had to be going through things at the same time, I had to be having my life experiences. And but I started out the book, I'm very enamored of the book True Grit, as I hope some of you are. I mean, the problem is the movies of True Grit are so good that we might neglect the book. And it's such a great book. Charles Portis wrote this book, I don't know when he wrote it, in the 60s maybe. And it's from the point of view of a 14-year-old girl, but it's actually told from a woman looking back and when she was 14. And it's very hard driving, like it's this first-person narrator who's just moving forward, this hard driving. And I tried to write the book that way. I wanted to tell it from the point of view of the young person in the book. And I just found it wasn't a rich enough story for me. I had a whole novel written from the point of view of this young woman when she was a little bit older, when she was 17. And I just didn't think it was a strong enough novel. And I'm trying to figure out what's really going on. So I moved it back in time. And I tried writing a third person point of view, from her point of view. And then I tried to expand it just to the family. I was going to share the point of view of the people in the family, the women in the family. And it's funny, I had a different view of the book because I kind of saw these women under siege from the town. I mean, they're on a little island. There's only a walking bridge to get across, so they could kind of close themselves off from the world. And they just wanted to be left alone. And I found that actually I wanted to even more than that. Originally I was thinking, okay, the women have to win. That's what I thought. This is a story about women, and they have to win. And it's kind of like the town is sort of a masculine town. It's sort of a hyper-masculinized community. Everyone's armed, and it's farmers, and they have their own agenda about what they want to do with the swamp. But then I found I wanted to actually take in the men's point of view as well, or the community's point of view. And I found that the book got richer. The book now takes in everyone's point of view, including kind of the land's point of view. The land and the landscape is very important in this story. And so having this kind of godlike point of view where I can go anywhere I want, it really opened up possibilities. But I think how many in here are writers? Okay, a bunch, yeah. You can see what the problem is. When you open up all those possibilities, suddenly I had a 650-page novel, and I wasn't sure where it was going. So then I had to really discipline myself and figure out, okay, I know how all these people feel, and I know how they've felt historically. I know this community so well. I know the changes in the community. And then I really had to dial it back and figure out what really is important for this story. And so that's how it got back to 400 pages. But it was very hard to come up with a plot because it doesn't fit, the story doesn't fit definitely doesn't fit the hero's journey. It's not the hero's journey. And in some reading I've done since, I'm realizing that the hero's journey really doesn't fit women anyway. It never did. We could kind of fake the hero's journey, and I kind of did it in Once Upon a River. You can kind of shape something kind of into the hero's journey for women, but a story of community can't be fit into that shape because it's really not about personal achievement. It's about finding ways that community can work, and the ways in which a community can allow the people in it to become as wise as they can become. And that's what I'm working for the women and for the men in the book. And I needed that omniscient point of view. I needed that ultimate roving point of view that could be anywhere that it needed to be, including stepping outside and sort of speaking in general about what this small rural community is like and how it's been changed by the forces of history. So that omniscient viewpoint was what I needed to do that. There were a number of challenges in writing an omniscient viewpoint, and I don't know if those of you aren't writers, this will drive you crazy having to listen to this, but one thing is that it means that if I keep a secret from the reader, then I'm being coy, because I know everything. The narrator knows everything. So it means the story can't really be about keeping secrets. It can't really be about suddenly. So there are some surprises in the book, but they're never hidden. They're just out of the main view. And hopefully when you get to those surprises, you'll see that, yes, it was there all along. Because the omniscient narrator, if that narrator's holding something back from you, then you might feel tricked. And the other thing is, those of you who do something other than writing, like carpentry, or music, or art, or you know that the hardest thing to do is transitions. How does one part of a thing fit with the other part of a thing? You know, how do things go together? If you're building a room, you need to have the wall come to the floor, and it has to look good where they meet up. And so having this point of view that can go anywhere, like every single bit of it is a transition, moving from one place where I'm paying attention and moving to the next place. So I sort of think that's what I spent 2 years doing. It's just moving, figuring out how to move elegantly from one place to another. And hopefully, when you read it, you won't even notice. And that's where all my work went, in just you not noticing.
And, Bon, I think to give us kind of a sense of how this works, it would be lovely if you could read chapter 6.
You like that?
I really do like that. I think it really
And it's
illustrates
just
what
a
you're
little,
talking about.
I can just read a piece of
Yeah,
it.
read a piece
And
and
I
then get a
don't-
sense of the landscape.
Yeah, and this will give you a sense of the landscape, and it'll give you a sense of the omniscient narrator. It won't give you too much of that transition, because I think I'm just gonna read a section that stays there, but you know what I mean about those transitions. But I'll read a little bit of this. It's about, I think it's about 7.5 minutes. So, you may need to shake your shoulders out, and And I should give a shout out to my friend Susan, who gave me this scarf. Did you guys notice? It's the cover of the book. You know, I feel so lucky to have friends like Lisa who talk to me. Okay, I think it was 64, I think it was 95. Okay, did I say that? Okay, I'm gonna, the chapters are, and because it's a it has a little bit of mathematics in it, the first chapter is chapter 0 instead of chapter 1. The prologue is called chapter 0. And can you guess what the epilogue is called?
Googleplex? Chapter 11.
It's chapter Infinity.
Oh, boy.
Because the girl in the story has sort of a complicated relationship with infinity. She's a little bit afraid of it, as maybe we all are, a little bit afraid of infinity. Okay, this is chapter 6, and has a title, Times Change Faster Than the People in Them. Once upon a time, in the low-lying fields and floodplains surrounding the waters, farm families used to grow the sweet, crisp, white heart celery, superior to any celery you can get today. Men tilled the rich black muck with mule-drawn plows, or did the work with their own sinewy bodies and the aid of their wives, or unmarried sisters, or unlanded brothers, or their lusty, restless teenage sons. The farm kids all worked, even the little ones, who would squat alongside the trenches and place 10-week-old celery seedlings at 8-inch intervals. To make this work possible for even the most dreamy or distracted girls and boys, they each carried a stick, or a deer's thigh bone, or an antler, broken off to measure the distance between plants. Then the women came along the rows and stood the little plants upright, and heaped the swamp soil onto the stems, wrapped that rich muck around each one like a woolen scarf to protect it from cold spring nights. Sometimes a woman had to stop in her work and smile and take a deep breath as she watched her husband and children, for otherwise she would spill over with an unholy kind of joy, the joy of being in a body on this earth with other beloved bodies. The women revisited each plant each week to mound the dirt a little higher and higher still, and to bind the plants to sticks to keep them growing upward instead of sprawling. Eventually, when the plants were tall enough, they placed boards against the stalks to protect them from the sun and keep them soft, crisp, and blanched, as pale as milk, until harvest. The celery was more profitable than other crops and had a longer season. The women and men tenderly laid the big cut celery heads to rest in coffin-shaped cardboard boxes, separating them with parchment so they could be carried on ice by the mail train every Friday from July through October, mostly to hotels in Chicago. The farm families themselves didn't eat the glamorous whole celeries, and certainly not the tender inner stalks favored by hotel patrons. Instead, they collected the wayward stalks throughout the season to chop and boil in soups. For themselves, they grew another kind of celery, celeriac, for its root that tasted a little like chestnuts and stayed firm even when cooked, best roasted with a fatty young hen or baked into a savory pie with onion and cheese. When the muscles and joints of the men and women ached in those days, they prayed and took aspirin. And if that didn't work, there was a penetrating peppermint and cayenne ointment to be gotten from Baba Rose in the waters to soothe them, until the infinite hereafter could provide the ultimate soothing. Why wouldn't a Christian on this outrageous earth take advantage of what comfort nature offered? Relief from the fever of ague, from the throbbing of a foot trampled by a spooked plow mule. Mortal joy's eternal companion was suffering, and wasn't the pain of this profane earth calling out for a profane cure? Weren't Christians obligated to find relief from bodily pain, to free the soul to do the soul's work? when the large-scale growing of celery and other market vegetables went west to California half a century ago, the celery farmers were ashamed, the way a sailor's wife was ashamed when her husband was lost to a storm on Lake Michigan. Their shame overtook in intensity their sadness over losing their fields of celery and lettuce and melon and squash. And many farmers could no longer bear to look at their wives or children in the evenings without some spirit in them. And as the men filled in the mucky celery rows to grow field crops like wheat and oats, their shame redoubled. They knew, all of them, that they should say good riddance to farming and rejoice, should take the opportunity to sell their fields to the bigger farms with expensive combine harvesters. For wasn't that the history of civilization, that the old many gods had combined into one great God? Titus Clay's father, Titus Clay Sr., that great man, would eventually farm almost every field on this side of unincorporated Whiteheart, harvesting corn and soybeans with specialized machinery he would never finish paying for. His cripplingly shy wife, meanwhile, spent her time worrying about her sons and husband's hemophilia and keeping the house and garden immaculate. The Titus's clothes were always very clean. It wasn't just Whiteheart. The many crops of the upper Midwest were winnowed to two, corn and beans. Each supported the other by its action upon the soil. But the men saw the relationship differently. They saw themselves as corn farmers, and they embraced soybeans only because the plants fixed the soil nitrogen in the way a wife should support her husband. The native peoples of this region, of whom Baba Rose had been a descendant, had a third plant in their garden mounds, a third sister to corn and beans, pumpkin or squash, the big leaves of which provided shade at the base of the plant to protect the soil from drought. The new farmers instead used field irrigation systems to keep the soil moist. Decades ago, husbands and wives stopped working together, and then they had only meals and sex and children in common, and that was when they stopped laughing together. Their separate stories no longer made sense to each other, and they began to forget the old songs they used to sing from one end of the row to another just to hear one another's voices. When the women used to hang the family laundry on the line to blow in the wind, the husbands and wives were inspired by those flapping garments to move closer to one another, to admire one another's strong bodies, to remember dancing together, and to see their daily work as another kind of dance. But then the husbands went to work in the paper mill, and the women purchased electric dryers that hid the soft movement of the clothes inside them. There was a time when men and women accepted mystery. When spouses accepted, they would not know everything about their partners. The women would never know what some of the men did on Saturday nights in the basement of the church when they donned their brotherhood uniforms. The men knew nothing of the nature of women's bleeding and their nighttime journeys to the waters. But once people were forced to conform to a rigid schedule, any mysterious use of time made their spouses suspicious. I'm gonna stop there.
Wow.
Sounds kind of heterosexual though, doesn't it?
Sounds human.
Sounds
Yeah.
very human, yeah. But I mean, I was trying to figure out what's been lost, trying to figure out from these farm families how the farm families seem different now.
And in many ways, I think, Bonnie, your work really stems from this relationship between the landscape, the natural world, and then the characters that emerge from it. They're so interconnected, and I know you've noted that characters are who they are because of the landscape they inhabit. And just a little bit to kind of put this all in kind of the context of how long Bonnie has really been thinking about these issues. In her novel, Q Road, which was her first one, she explores land development issues, and she says, I wanted to invent a character that made me ask myself, what would she be like if she grew out of the ground in Kalamazoo, Michigan? when she wrote her novel Once Upon a River, which was published in 2011, she wanted to do something similar with the protagonist of that novel named Margot Crane. And she asked the question, what would it be like if Margot Crane were the embodiment of the Kalamazoo River? So what were you in the waters? What were you trying to imagine? What questions?
Yeah, I mean, you know, who knows if it's in real life quite so extreme, but it feels like my characters are so intimately connected to their landscapes. I mean, it really feels that way. And the women of the waters they live in the swamp. And I didn't originally have them in the swamp. I originally just had them as a farm family. They were women living on a farm. But then I just realized the way that they have to come from a place that's liminal, a place that's neither land nor water, a place that's maybe mysterious with each step and changes with each step. And I invented something in the waters that's called quick muck. It's funny, nobody seems surprised that I have these things that don't exist anywhere else in my story, but great if I can get away with it. So people have to be a little bit afraid that in the waters that they're just going to sink and not come up. I also invented the conch shell. Nobody's asked me about it yet. They're cowrie shells, but I call them conch shells because they look like lady parts. And I love them that way. And they have there's a purpose for them in the book, that they're used as when women are asking for a certain thing from the healer. But nobody's been bothered by it, so I'm like, I win. But these women, it just seemed that this is where they had to be, in this swampy area. And it's that, so in dry weather, they actually are connected to the land, and in floods, they're in the water. So their lives really do change with the seasons. And also, like a lot of you, I'm really interested in wetlands. They are some of our most important ecosystems. I mean, the wetlands are probably teeming with more life than either the land or the water around it. And these are the places that prevent flooding, they prevent other ecological disasters. And has anybody read the Annie Proulx book, the Fens, Bogs, and Swamps? It's fun. It's a really short little book, and I think I listened to it as a book on tape, actually. But yeah, and it's just she really explores the importance of them, and she also teaches you the difference between fens and swamps and bogs, and we often call a lot of things the swamp, but it's the swamp properly is actually a wet forest. So it'll have trees growing in it, and I thought, yeah, that's what I want. Whereas a marshland is a little different, and a fen is a little bit different. But I just felt that this mysterious place was where these women are, and they're also very much in danger. I'm not quite sure about Minnesota, but much of southern Michigan was swamp land, and most of it has been filled in. I think maybe you guys are the same way. A little, that there was a lot more swampland, and it's of course been filled in for crops. But I think so when Native Americans were living here, that's why there was a lot more wild. And in the book, Michigan was also a wild rice state, but ours has been almost wiped out. There's very, very little wild rice grown there, and I think a lot of people are trying to grow more now. But we, the richness of the place seemed perfect for these are very fertile women, these are very complicated women, and these are women who do what they want.
And much of your writing, I think, is driven sort of by desire, you've told me. But one of the things I also want to talk about in terms of like the landscape is, you're often thought of as a Midwestern writer, but you're also somebody who's really, you take the notion of the Midwest and you gesture towards something that's much more Americana.
Yeah.
And you've said, and this is, I'm helping out my colleague over here, Ellen Lansky, because we're doing a panel at the American Literature Association on Bonnie Jo's work. So I'm going to quote a little bit about something that Bonnie has said that I think you might be interested in. Yeah.
Is
So-
this what I said like 2 nights ago?
Yeah, you did.
Okay.
I'm trying to pay attention to you, Bonnie. You've said in a recent talk, and I think this is useful for us to consider just as Americans in general. You say paying close attention to wild spaces makes American literature American literature. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I'm kind of feeling, I'd say I came to a realization, but I may change my mind next week. But I know we have great cities, I know we have small towns, but I think that the mythos of America and American literature is still tied up in open spaces. I think our deep-rooted mindset somehow is still connected to the Wild West. It's connected to the, what do we call it? What's the manifest destiny? I think we're really affected by that. And what I realize is, I'm called a Midwestern writer, but what I really am is a writer of Americana, because I write about hyper-American issues. I write a lot about guns. Guns are very much an American thing. I write about nature. And I'm just going to say, I think it's very important for those of you who are American writers. I think nature writing is an integral part of most of the great American literature. I think more so than European literature. I really think you can have perfectly urban European literature, but I think if you start thinking about it, I'm gonna have to think more about it, because I've only recently started thinking this way, but I think our literature, and that's why we as writers have to know our landscapes. We really have to know them. I think we have to know the names of things, we have to know the names of plants and animals. I'm very dissatisfied with a book if somebody just tells me there's a brown bird there. I want to know what that bird is, and even in the plants, it's the same. I'm not even happy hearing about a fern. I want to know if it's a fiddlehead fern. I want to know what kind of fern it is. Certainly wildflowers, don't say wildflowers unless you're going to start naming them. And I think that's a curiosity. I don't know, maybe it's not, but I think that's a curiosity of a lot of much of the important American fiction, that we are very aware of our landscape and our plants and animals. So that nature writing really is an important part of our American literature.
Now, I do wonder if do we need enough time for questions, right? I don't know if we're,
Yeah.
Do you want to open it up?
yeah, I think that would be awesome. Are you ready to?
Yeah,
Let's
let's see
let
if
it rock and roll and
anybody's-
see who
anybody
wins.
has a question. You can see Lisa and I could just deteriorate into talking about all kinds of stuff.
You said it took you a long time, exactly how long?
Yeah, it took about 8 years to write this book, but I'll confess, there are parts of this book, I mentioned that I wrote a previous book, and the previous book I actually started probably 18 years ago. So the seeds of this book have been in the works for a long time, but since I sat down and tried to write it, it was 8 years, and Once Upon a River was 5 years, so I really didn't think this was gonna take so much longer, but it did. And part of it is because I was fighting it. I was fighting this book. I mean, this book really came out of my soul. Like, I know it sounds corny to say that, but I tried to write a more traditional novel. I tried to write a hero's journey, and it wouldn't get written. It wouldn't write what I was trying to write. And I think that was good. I think it was good that I didn't, because, I don't know, I think I'm only gonna have probably a dozen books, and so I wanna make sure that I'm serving the material absolutely the best way I can. So, so it took me that long to find the right way to present the material that was so important to me.
Alicia has questions. Do you want the mic?
I just wanted to, does that work?
Here's one of our writers, one of the writers.
ask you if there is a pivot here, because I think there is a vein of American writing, and sometimes it's a Paradise Lost thing about the nature of the human relationship to the land. But I think there is another vein that is very much about cities. Our power structures are in the
Yes.
cities where people don't care what kind of a bird it is. And there is a vein of the relationship to the land is to exploit it, to master it,
Yeah.
and to mechanize and beat it into submission. And so I just am interested in,
Yeah, no,
in what way are you maybe pushing back against that, or other writers of the land and Americana pushing back against that?
Yeah, and well, I will just say that you're right, absolutely, we have great books about the city, great books, great city books. I mean, we have the whole, you know, realism with Theodore Dreiser, and we have city stories by Stu Dybek, and her, you know, not Horatio Alger, who am I thinking of, who's the other one? But I agree, we have these stories, but I'm gonna go around and find the stories that live in people's hearts. And I still will make the case that I think, even though we have great city stories, but, you know, I'm gonna say, you know, and I'll even claim Herman Melville in this, is that he's out in the ocean. That I think the stories that live in us as America, and I'm gonna say there's a lot about it that's about the American reader as well. There are curiosities about the American reader as well. And I'm gonna say, like, for example, the American reader, unlike the European reader, I think, the American reader never wants to be told how to think. The minute you become didactic, and this is in the literary tradition, of course, because popular fiction, this doesn't hold. Genre fiction, there's plenty, we know exactly, you read a mystery, you know who the bad guy is, you know who the good guy is. But in literary fiction, I'm gonna say that's why we avoid political literary fiction, I think. Because the minute we see the reader is pushing an opinion, we push back. I think that's just inherently American. And so it makes it it's a little different. And that's why I don't know if we really have a tradition of philosophical novels in the sense that there's so many great European philosophical novels. But I mean, I'm not really a critic. This is just, the problem is, as a writer, you have so many hours sitting there writing, and all these things come to you. So they shouldn't even really let us out on the speaker tour, because we have it all bottled up inside us, you know, all these theories, all these things. You know, it's funny, there's so many things when you're writing a book that you just do to entertain yourself when you're writing a book. Like the names that you give the characters, those are often just for your own entertainment, because you're gonna be living in that book for years, you know. I can't think of one right now, but I'll think of one of these things that I put in the book. It's just for my entertainment. Nobody knows. I don't think anybody even notices that the names of the donkeys are from the Kipling poem. You know, the donkeys are named Triumph and Disaster, but they call the girl Astor, of course, Triumph and Astor. So, but there's a reason that they're named that from the Kipling poem, and you find out in the book. You know, but part of it is just to entertain myself as I'm writing.
Well, you do put in some names of real people.
I did.
Yeah.
I put in a lot of there's kind of a Greek chorus of men in the book. So it functions as a Greek chorus. There's 6 men, a half a dozen men, and plus Titus. So there's actually 7 men, but these 6 men play the role of communicating the feelings of the town. And so I really enjoyed doing that. And I named them after guys I went to high school with. So, and I know that one of those guys, Dickman, is reading the book right now, so I'm eager to see what he thinks. So.
I think he did well.
He did very well.
He's
He's kind of
It's Standish I worry about.
yeah. And it's so funny because the Standish guy I named him after, it's like, he's always chiming in on my Facebook page with smart ass comments. I don't think he'll read the book. He may not ever find that. But I used his last name. It's only his last name.
And you do bring in the tow truck driver that you've written about before.
Yes.
So it is interesting. It'll be fun to see your Michigan readers, your hometown readers. You'll be in your hometown next month, right?
Next week, Saturday.
What's Saturday? Okay.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's fun to be a hometown writer, and I've been very lucky in that my people like me. You know, I mean, I know often people say, you know, they have to go out of town to be liked. And it's like oddly enough, and you know, can you believe this? The local museum just put an exhibit about me. Isn't that funny? Just a little Bonnie Jo Campbell museum exhibit. which I found
Kalamazoo
very
Valley
funny. So
Community
come to
Museum.
Kalamazoo. No, don't.
It's lovely. It'll be fun. I think you're gonna get a nice crowd there. Do we have any other questions though before?
question. Do you want the mic? No, I don't think so. I was gonna ask you about influences, Bonnie. We've talked about Carson McCullers and ballads and everything. But while you were talking about Americana, I started hearing like rock and roll. I don't know, like the Springsteen song just came into my head. So I was wondering what you were listening to when you wrote this book.
You know, it's funny because I made a playlist.
Okay.
There's a playlist online, so let me know if you can't find it.
Yeah.
But there's a fun thing. Actually, if any of you have favorite books, especially if they're kind of literary, small press books, there's a website called Large Hearted Boy, and the guy does playlists for many of the books that you would like to read. I mean, he'll do a playlist for them. It's a fun thing. So mine's really long. I couldn't stop myself.
Well,
And that-
tell us a couple.
Yeah.
Oh, well, of course, I hope all of you love the Highwomen playing their theme song, which is a takeoff on the Highwaymen song, that sort of hyper masculine song. I am a highwayman, I love something. Do you guys know this song? It's who are the guys in it?
Nelson.
Willie Nelson.
Chris Christopherson?
Yeah, the highwayman. and,
Yeah, is it Johnny Cash too? No.
Yeah, Johnny.
Wait.
Waylon Jennings?
Yeah, and it's about one's a bandit, it's these four men, and one's a bandit and one's a highwayman who would rob you, and then one's the guy who helped build the Hoover Dam, and
Right.
it's these kind of masculine men, and so these women became the highwaymen, and there's songs about women doing good, you know, women raising children, and actually women who were persecuted. One's about an immigrant coming to the border who dies, and one is about a female preacher when you weren't supposed to be a female. It's a beautiful song, so that's one I love. There's a Dar Williams song. There are many songs. Is it Dar Williams who sings the Ocean song? I love the Ocean song. I actually put a different song in addition, but the Ocean. Do any of you know that song? It's the best song ever, especially about a watery place. It's a song she sings to the ocean and to this town that's on the ocean. And she's like, there's a line in there where it's like, I mean, I'm about the lyrics, yes, because I'm a writer. But I mean, there's a song where like the ocean talks back and it says, I'm not sentimental, I'll eat your sailors, I'll spit up their keepsakes, you know, go ahead and worship me, I will kill you, you know. And it's just a beautiful song. And I like that song, The Front Porch. I like who sings that song, The Front Porch? It's all like, you know, sort of.
What's the song your mom liked? Don't you include the song that your mom, the singer that your mom listened to?
Who is that?
She's an older gal that, of course.
Oh, no, and it's not my mom, but it should be my mom's favorite song. It's Norma, do any of you know Norma Waterston? Oh my God. There's a great song, and it actually isn't written by her, but it's called God Loves a Drunk. Does anybody know who wrote it? It's a guy who wrote it. I mean, it's the obvious guy who wrote it. The minute we say his name, you'll say,
Sounds
oh.
like Hank Williams.
No, it's not. I'm gonna be embarrassed. Somebody might put up on that thing. But it's a wonderful song because she gives it gravity because she's a 65-year-old woman who's seen hard times singing this song. She's a British singer. But, you know, I like the voices of older gals, you know, and so it's just a great song. But anyway, you can hear it all, but I kind of like for this I chose mostly women, I think, for this. I think I have one guy. And then I chose, just because there's one thing that has to be different from the others, I chose the Tom Lehrer math song, New Math. I have that whole thing memorized. That old Did anybody grow up listening to Tom Lehrer? Because I definitely did. But he has a song about the frustration with new math, and because the girl in the book studies math, I included that. Because no one else around her can understand what she's talking about when she gets on her math. Yeah, any other questions?
No, I'm good. Is Empire Falls an important book to you at all?
I love the book Empire. Well, I tell you what I really love about Empire Falls is that prologue. I could just reread that prologue all day. It's just this rolling thing about all the men and women of this community. And I like the book a lot, and it's funny, I got a chance to actually eat dinner with Russo after that. It was a rare opportunity. I just went to like a college thing at Hope College, and he was there. And you know, I tried to get information out of him. I'm like, how different are your early drafts from your finished draft? He would not answer a question. He wouldn't tell me. Because I was just trying to figure out, how do you write a book like that? Because it's epic. It is epic. It's like it's a 3-generation saga. That's a good point. I wonder if I am kind of I didn't think of that book at the time, but that is in the family of my book. It's in the same family, like really trying to figure out, trying to hold on to this piece of land, you know, and how strongly all the people feel about it, and how misguided many of the people are. So yeah, thank you for reminding me about that book. Yeah, I really think that might have been a high point for him. I mean, he's a great writer. I like a lot of what he writes, but somehow that he really did capture the way that people are about land over the generations. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Jane Hamilton has a land book too, doesn't she? More recently, she's been writing about many generations of people on the land.
Well, I think we have time for just one more question. If anybody has one?
I know somebody's got a good one. You know, I'll answer anything.
Would you like the mic?
No, I was just curious how you brought up the idea of shame as the farming changed. I thought that was really
Yeah, it was very
interesting.
odd that came to me when I was trying to explore what happened.
Yeah.
You know, what happened to people, and what happens when a way of life slips away. And I think in that community, and that I did, oddly enough, I don't know where I came up with that metaphor of comparing it to a woman who feels ashamed when her husband dies at sea,
I was
as
afraid
though
that too.
she has done something wrong. I think the part of the woman at sea, I actually think, and this is a little bit of, I don't push anything hard in the book, but I gently suggest things. People will say they don't believe in magic, you know, and they don't believe in mysterious forces. But I think for all of us, when someone close to us dies in a terrible way, or we lose something, we think we could have prevented it. I mean, it is a natural feeling. We could have prevented this disaster. And I think because these farmers, I mean, even farmers today, when you meet them, they're so dogged, and they just keep at what they're doing. And some years things go really badly, and they take it to heart, even though they're doggedly doing their best. And I think there is an element of the farm is something that these farmers took pride in. The farm was like their body, and now they've let it go. You know, maybe they had to sell it, but I think we feel that way even about selling the family house if it's impossible to keep it. We feel a bit of shame about letting a thing go that's desperately important and that matters desperately. I think it's just kind of a natural part, but I only came to it through the writing. I only came to it, but it felt right when I came to it. And I revise a lot. And so sometimes I'll come up with a feeling about something, and then I write it out of the next draft because it didn't ring true after that. But somehow that shame rang true. And I do think, I mean, when I'm very interested in alcoholism, and I know that alcoholism is a big problem among farmers, and especially among failing farmers. Alcoholism is a big deal. And I think there's a reason, it does all fit together somehow, so thank you for noticing that.
I think that may be it.
Wow.
But Bonnie will be signing. She has lovely bookmarks as well.
Yes, I have beautiful bookmarks, make sure you get one. I made them, you know, you gotta get what you can out of these publishers. They're not always forthcoming. I tried to get them to make some more stuff for me, make me some snake tattoos. No tattoos for me. just
Well, you
but
sell a
bookmarks.
million copies, they'll probably be making some snakes.
You think so?
Yeah, I think they
Okay,
might.
let's try that.
So thank you all for coming. We really appreciated it, and we're looking forward to hearing what folks have to say about the book. So
Oh,
enjoy it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for coming. This was so nice to see you. So I'm gonna go, I think they want me to sign over there at a table.